From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In this podcast, I sit down with my good friend Todd Jones of Copywriting, and we talk about all things AI and copywriting. Grab a drink, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob here again. Today I'm here with my good friend and guest, Todd Jones of Copywriting. How are you today, Todd?
Not too bad. I can't complain. So it's muggy and we're gonna have storms later, but pretty good.
Could you send some of that muggy weather north of the border so I can get rid of the
Yeah,
stuff?
I figured you guys will get your share of it before it's over with. But yeah, it's coming across actually, I think from Texas right now. I expect our friends in Oklahoma might get some too. So
I was kidding with my good friend Robert Rowley at Patchstack this week that the last storm came up from Colorado and Robert's in Colorado. So I said, what the hell are you sending me? I don't need presents like this.
Yeah, you don't need the cold. You want we have the warmer weather, but it's muggy. And I'll tell you, in February, March, when you have 70, 80 degrees and inevitably a drop comes, and often when that drop comes, it creates storms, often bad storms, which actually, if you saw the news earlier this week, Norman, Oklahoma had tornadoes and they had some pretty crazy pictures. And that's what you get. Hail, storm, tornadoes, high wind. And so that's what happens when cold air clashes with warm air. And we got the warm air right now. But right now, actually, what's coming through the state, not really trying to do a weather report, but there's actually a warm front coming through. But it is going to create some storms after a while. So, but that's typical this time of year in this part of the country. I know we have some friends in Oklahoma, Talisha and Corey Miller. Yeah, those folks are in Oklahoma, and we got several in North Texas. I think Kathy Van Zant is in Denton area. So, we all understand that because we're all in that target zone, and so we're all checking on each other this time of year.
While we're chatting, we should give a big shout out to those three because they're such an integral part of our community, and we're so lucky to have them. So.
I've already interacted with Talisha on Twitter this morning. So she said it's March the 1st and something. I said, "Really? Is it?" She said, "Yeah." So
I had to catch up with Kathy's aunt yesterday, which I rather enjoyed.
Kathy she's just a gem, and I keep moving more and more into cadence. Which is my plan for Conway scene. And I'm looking forward to doing that. But I have to say, I'm using more blocks, and I know not everybody likes blocks in the WordPress community. And if you're a developer, it can be problematic because there's a lot of movement. Some people feel like PHP is not being used very well anymore. We're using more JavaScript.
No question.
And that's all beyond me because I'm not a hardcore developer. So we've got some friends that are kind of not really pleased with that. But I will say for someone who's maybe not a hardcore developer like myself, it makes building a website, I almost say easier, but it could be. So I did a project starting at the end of last year, first this year for a new client. And they had one of those themes from one of those multi-purpose themes from ThemeForce or whatever, and we moved it to Generate Press, and I used one of the child themes. And shout out to Mike Oliver who gave me some feedback on some stuff. But wow, I was very impressed with Generate Press. It took me a little bit to figure it out, but I'm sold on Generate Press, Cadence, and of course Astra. Those are themes that I've used Astra for a long time. Speaking of Astra, Brainstorm Force is having like their 13th or 14th birthday right now. So all three of those I think are really solid theme options, and I don't want to get into having 20 theme frameworks to pull from. Everybody's got their favorite, and I understand, but those three to me have been really good, and I've been pleased working with those three theme frameworks, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
No question. And just a little shout out to my good friend Brian Gardner over at WP Engine and Sam Nuno's. They host a group on Friday called Builder Mode. So if you ever want to learn more about FSC or blocks and get in on that conversation, Mike McAllister at WP Engine's in on it as well.
I need to actually go to one of those. For one, I mean, I've actually had a conversation, like a Zoom call with Brian. He was really cool. We had a conversation a couple years ago. Sam is, of course, super active on Twitter, and that's my only interaction with her. So I really need to show up sometime just to kind of take all that in. I don't quite grasp the full, the FSC, full site editing thing just yet. So thankfully they're not like throwing everything out and saying you have to do this. I get the idea that it can be very helpful. I'm pretty comfortable using the Generate Press, Cadence, Astra model, and I'm okay with that. I don't quite get the full site editing, but it'd be nice to sit in and listen and maybe learn a little bit, because that's really, I mean, when it comes to Gutenberg, that's how I kind of learned. I would hop on Wednesday mornings with Joe Casabona, and he'd do his little live thing, and I would watch him, and he was using he was using Cadence actually. So it was like, okay, that makes sense. I can do that. And so I started playing around with it, built a couple sites using Gutenberg, and I already had Astra, and Astra worked with Gutenberg out of the box. So I was well, we'll just use Astra.
That's the best way to learn it. I mean, I moved a live site, as many people with this podcast know. And one of the things I'm working on right now, because I went down the rabbit hole, is I'm about to change the color scheme of the website and the background colors and all of that. And with Gutenberg, it's such a breeze to do. So
make sure you check with Colleen Greatzer to make sure you've got your accessibility with your colors before you do that.
Yeah, here we go again.
I love Colleen and Amber Hines, who kind of spearhead the accessibility, and I've learned a lot from those two as well, just sitting and listening to them.
So today I thought we'd talk a little bit about AI. But before we get there, I don't know if I've ever asked you. I know you've done some work in the WordPress space, and you do a lot of work in the copywriting space. How did you get into the copywriting space? What kind of precipitated that?
Oh, my goodness. It's an evolution, man. I was always more of a website builder, not really a developer or even a designer for that matter. Some people like our friend Ryan kind of come from the design. He did a lot of design before he ever got into development, and he's way better at developing than I am. I don't have a design degree. When I first did any kind of website building, actually the first website I built was on Front Page Express, which was bundled free.
You're dating yourself, my friend. That's a long time ago.
That was on, it was bundled with Internet Explorer 4. And I got tasked to finish a website for the church I was at. And so I learned what I was doing and did that. Eventually I switched to, we call it the poor man's Dreamweaver. It's called Namo Web Editor, I think out of Japan. It was off the shelf. You could get it for about $100. I'd go to CompuServe, right?
There's a chain that's again dating yourself that's not around anymore. I don't think.
Yeah, and a lot of that time I was working at Borders Books. Again, doesn't exist anymore. And actually, so anyway, I did the web editor. I got into blogging, right, for football sake. I had a college football blog. Started out doing that on Blogspot.
Focused on the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yeah. Well, I was doing college football in general. I think I originally called it collegefootballtop10.com, college football top 10. Because when I was a kid, this is something I like to do. I did polls. I call them Todd Jones posted polls. And I would do songs, and I would do I guess I would do sports. I don't remember what all I did, but I did these polls. So I had my top 10s. Like, everybody's got an opinion, right? I'll just throw my opinion in there. And I was in the backyard of TCU, which was rising at the time as a football powerhouse before they ever made the national championship game. And watching what they were doing. And of course, I was a big Razorback fan. And at that time, they had the backfield was loaded with Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and Peyton Hillis. And so there was a lot of good football going on between probably my two favorite schools at the time when it came to college football. So I did college football. I decided I want to put all this on one website. I don't want it to be Blogspot and then have the rest of it somewhere. Yep. So I was trying to figure out how to integrate Blogspot into my website. And I realized it just was probably going to be too much of a hassle. One of the sites that I read regularly, blogs, was called Razor Bloggers. It was a Arkansas Razorback football, mostly blog. And they were on WordPress. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I have this account. I don't remember it was like Bluehost or something at the time, but it was way before Bluehost, but some other, I have this account, and it had push button install for WordPress. So I installed it. And
so you started with the push button install.
Yeah,
you never did the famous 5-minute manual install.
Well, I did later. When I worked at the agency, I did later. I learned how to do it. But at this point, it's like, you click, in cPanel, with BillyHost has a cPanel. And even if you use SiteGround or Hostinger, they all have some, you click the button and the script runs and installs it. Mm-hmm. Right. All of them have that now. So it's like, why do it unless you want to install something completely clean, which I understand because almost every host, when they install something, has some must-use plugin that you never wanted. So they all have it. I guess the cPanel doesn't really install anything like that. We did the migration to BillyHost last week, and I don't recall there being something I didn't want in there.
No, so, they don't add anything. But little secret: if you're doing something clean, create a clean install, create it with all your standard plugins and themes and all of that stuff, and then save it, and then you can just migrate that install to whatever dev site you're working on.
You create a blueprint. You create a blueprint, basically, is what you're doing. And when I worked at the agency, that's what we did. We were using Genesis, the Genesis framework. And I think eventually, before I left, they chose one of the child themes that we use the most and kind of created that as our. And so whenever I took over a project, it had already been installed and the theme we wanted, and then we just started doing the front end development. But anyway, to go on, I did the website using WordPress, which was new to me. I had to go buy. I was at Borders at the time. I could get 33% off of most books. So I went and got Lisa Saban Wilson's, Dummies, WordPress for Dummies, the big one, she had a small one, and there was only one was 8-in-1 books. Yep. I bought that, started learning how to use WordPress. All of that was for me to do the blog, which I did. Then I launched another blog called DFW Football, and it was about football and Dallas Fort Worth. Anyway, so I did that for a while. And of course I went into development or whatever you want to call it, working for agency and whatnot. But I felt like all along my calling card was probably more content related. Developers at that time just wanted to develop and move on. Right. But I'm like, well, you got to do something as a business owner. You want to make this website work and adding content regularly. That was pretty much the secret sauce 12 years ago, adding content regularly. And I felt there was a opportunity there for me. And then somebody told me about copy bloggers, and there I go. I start reading copy bloggers. I also had read pro bloggers. I think Darren Rouse, I think his name, Australian guy.
Darren used to do
Yeah.
a course back in the day called Write a Blog for 30
Right.
days and sold it quite successfully because at that time,
He was
out
ahead of the
content,
game.
He was ahead of the game.
And so was Brian Clark with the copy bloggers. They were ahead of the game. They were talking about content marketing before most people were. There weren't even books out about content marketing at the time. But also at the same time, I was exploring social media marketing. A lady from the Dallas area named Shama Hyder. I bought her. She's got at least two books out now, maybe three. I bought the first one literally as a PDF off her website. Eventually was published in a book. I bought 2 or 3 versions of that one. But it was originally a PDF. I bought it off her website for about $30. Trying to leverage social media to grow my blog, whatnot. All that comes together, and that's all under what I would call the copywriter umbrella. Then I started, I'm going to learn more about copywriting, actual copywriting. Because, when you read copy bloggers, they would talk about copywriting, even though it was the core was kind of content marketing. There was a lot of talk about copywriting, and over the years they had copywriters like Ben Settle and Joanna Wiebe and some other folks to write guest blog posts. And so, I started following Ben Settle, and I bought some of his books and was in a Facebook community he had for a while, get his emails. Then I started learning about conversion copywriting, which is probably another thread of copywriting. And of course, that is Queen, Joanna Wiebe, who's also from Canada. And went down that road, learned a lot about conversion copywriting, conversion rate optimization. Talia Wolf, friend of mine, works for Talia. There was a lady who she still runs this writing community. She didn't call it copywriting; she called it writing, because all the writers are all different kinds of writers in there. And I cannot remember her name right now for nothing. But I was in that community for a while, paying $25 a month or whatever, and met my friend Sophie, and She reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to be, writing buddies," or whatever she called it. And like, sure. We'd meet at least once a month and talk about what we're doing, that kind of thing, kind of keep each other on pace. And now she works for Talia Wolf, who's probably next to Pep Laha, probably one of the foremost conversion rate optimization. I call her the queen of conversion rate optimization. Sophie works for her. And just went down that whole route and figuring out what I am, what does it mean to be a copywriter? And everybody's got an opinion about that as well. And I have an opinion. Copywriting to me is anything that basically is business writing. So it could be long form content marketing, content writing. It could be conversion copywriting, which you do for landing pages or pages on your website. And then it can also be PPC copywriting, print copywriting. Actually, Neville Mandora put out I think I saved it somewhere, but he put out Neville, another guy that I started following in this process. He worked with the AppSumo guys, Sumo and all that. He did a lot of the copywriting for them, if you're wondering about Neville. And he put out a really good definition, and I thought, and it does include, in my opinion, everything that is done for business sake, and also nonprofits as well. But anything that basically copywriting, in my opinion, is any content copy that seeks to influence or persuade someone to take an action in pretty much any medium. So it could be print. It could be most copy and stuff is done digitally now. It's just the nature of where we are in our economy, but you still have brochures and you still have flyers that are put out. So anything, even signs on the road, there's copywriting in that. So there's kind of my evolution. I don't know if that really answers your question. It's kind of a long story, but
no, it's a good story. So let's kind of jump into speak of evolution. We have this thing called AI, artificial intelligence, running around. I was listening to last week's Tech News Weekly podcast with Jason Howell and Micah Sargent, and they were talking about the number of books that are now being written by ChatGPT. There's actually books in the Amazon store that say written by ABC and co-written by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then there's this big discussion, is that ethical or is it not? And Micah made this really good point in their podcast that some of the writing is worse than the stuff that AI puts out. So is that ethical? What is your whole feeling? And let's start with, how do you feel about something being written by AI if it's disclosed that it's written by AI versus if it's not disclosed it's written by AI?
Oh, that's a totally different concept. I think here's the thing. I like to liken business writing to some degree to writing your college term paper. Now, that is not going to be something everybody's excited about. Nobody really liked writing a term paper, but your professor always told you, if you're expressing a thought or quoting somebody, you always cite your source. That is going to be a downfall of AI, because I don't think that they may train it someday to actually do that, and if they do, that's great. But what you're doing, the guys from Grow and Convert talk about content. AI only going to speed up content that's not as good. That's my opinion. When you're talking about doing I don't think you should ever use AI for long form content, personally. If it's not going to cite the source or tell you where it comes from, then, you're just regurgitating information. So there's articles that when you do a topic research, this is how the process people go through to write an article. Sometimes I distinguish between an article and a blog post now, because in my opinion, businesses should almost always do an article. And I say that because I want people to equate it more to doing like you do when you write a college paper. Because you need to have that kind of quality in there as much as you can. It's not always possible. But the guys that Grow and Convert call it a Google research paper. And so that's what people do typically. They take a subject like, say, AI, and they're gonna put their keyword in there, and then you're gonna pull up the first page of the SERPs, the search engine result page, and you're gonna go through there, and there's probably 5 or 6 maybe organic articles about whatever your topic is. And then you take and you start lifting ideas from those articles, and you shape it into an article. That is what they say at Grow and Convert, and what I believe is a Google research paper. AI can do that probably better than you and me, and probably faster.
I would agree. And if it's a research paper, it's really easy. I did an experiment, which I haven't posted yet, and I went to ChatGPT. So let's go down that road, which came out in November. And I said to ChatGPT, who is Ken Dryden? So for those who don't know, Ken Dryden's a legendary Hall of Fame hockey player, played for the Montreal Canadiens. He's an author. He's a lawyer. He's been a politician, a cabinet minister in Canada. He's been kind of all over the map since he retired. And believe it or not, in this case, ChatGPT got most of the facts pretty well, because they're well documented on the web. Mm-hmm. I also went to ChatGPT and I said, which I have published on my business blog at stunningdigitalmarketing.com, I said, tell me how to secure a website using WordPress security. And what I'll tell you is, because that's a pretty detailed topic, ChatGPT got the basics really right, but didn't get any of the in-depth stuff really right.
If you want to do some compare it to some of the articles I did at Maine WP about the same topic, where I use subject matter experts. I let them do the talking, if you will, and we mentioned Kathy and you mentioned Robert, and both of them were part of that, and they both gave more in-depth answers. But I remember looking at that article, and I think I told you this, like when I did research, cursory research, because I was getting information from, I submitted a questionnaire to these folks, and there are about 5 of them, and I got detailed information from them based on experience, real world experience, not what they read, but I did a search, and I looked at some of those articles, and I told you, I said, that sounds like about half the articles I read when I was doing research on WordPress security. But I got much more. Yeah, I got more detail whenever I had Robert Riley and Kathy Van Zett and Edward O'Rourke, his name, and some others. There's 5 of them. They gave me, and it was based on real world experience. So, I mean, we're talking about guys and gals who are a part of maintaining and securing probably the total of them, thousands and thousands of websites,
And like you get more even talking to me because I've got over 300 in my portfolio. So.
Yeah, you never submitted any answers to that, but that's okay. I was going to ride you on that, but I had a couple people from the main WP community who did submit, so I was pleased with that. That was important to me that we had a couple people from the main WP community. And then we had some outside experts like Kathy and Robert who submitted as well. So, yeah, they went beyond those basic high points that your AI article, wrote up.
So I'd like to go one more step talking about AI. Our good friends Bridget Willier and Warren Lane-Nada just put out a book, which I had the honor of writing the introduction for. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I highlighted in the introduction, and I've said this to you over the years and on this podcast, is one of the things business owners need to do, especially small businesses, is make their business different and stand out from their competitors. Mm-hmm. And I think I know where I'm going with this. So if we're all using the same AI bot, how do we make ourselves stand out if the content it's putting out is the same?
Yeah. Are you asking me that question?
I am.
I'm glad you asked. I'm going to answer that with 2 content frameworks, and there are others out there on the internet, but these 2 I'm much more familiar with. One is from my friend Lily, who I had on the Messaging Matters show last year, and she's got what she calls the Lema framework, LEMA, and number 1 is logic. Number 2 is explicit. So basically, explicit is being specific and not using general phrases and general concept. And the last 2 I want you to pay attention to, because I think these 2 are the harder for something like AI to actually implement. Number 3 is memorable. M is memorable. So you want to write your content in a way it's memorable. And then last one is actionable. What kind of action can you take? So I like the idea. You don't have to use her framework, but I use them. I consider them like a checklist. Am I hitting these points? And then I guess Google has the EAT framework. I don't want to go into that just now, but that's important as well. Google does take a big emphasis on subject matter experts. So authority is one of the deals. Right, in the EEAT. The other content framework I want to mention is my own. It's called the REO framework, and it has nothing to do with depressed real estate property. It stands for relevant. R, it stands for relevant. And then E stands for engaging. So you want to write the kind of content that is engaging that people want to read. And then the last one is O, is original, something also, I think robots will have a hard time doing. But the ideal is what I think AI is going to produce is basic informational content. There is a place for that. So I'm not saying don't throw AI out. I'm not saying actually have a AI software that I use. But I think for longer form content and copy for your pages that, you have 1,000 words on or whatever, you need to be able to do those things. It needs to be engaging, which good copywriting will do because you learn how to do those things. You need to have a good style guide for your long form content, which I recommend getting Matty Osmond's book for that.
No question on that one. Maddie's book is the best book out there, and one you and I have kind of recommended all over the place. And if people want to learn more about Maddie, go look up the archives of this podcast she's been on. So,
yeah. So, but the bottom line is, I think AI is going to regurgitate information.
mm-hmm.
And so some of those things that's in Lily's framework and in my framework are going to be missed. And I think also there's going to be an going with citing sources, and because it's not going to have an original thought. It may have an original thought one day. If it does, I'm going to be a little worried about humankind. But because my thoughts, I keep revisiting the movie I, Robot in my head, and how much Will Smith detested those robots. And it started when he felt like they were thinking for themselves. Now, we as humans want to think for ourselves, but and they had some issues with Sydney, I think was her name, the Chat GPT from Microsoft. Apparently had some really interesting conversations with people, and Microsoft decided, maybe we ought to discontinue this. And a lot of the people in the SEO field play around with this stuff because they're all about content, right? You got to have the content for your keyword. And so I follow a lot of people that's much more in SEO than I am. And one of them is Lily Ray on Twitter. And she fits the engaging and the original and all that kind of stuff just as a person, because she is a kind of a different person for a professional SEO setting. And she's a DJ by night, and she's a lot of fun to follow. But she posted some stuff. I don't know if it was what she had or somebody else had with Sydney. And I was like, boy, that's kind of interesting. She actually hurt Sydney's feelings, and Sydney shut her down. So I was like, I don't know what to think about this. So I think we have to tread lightly with the automation stuff. I think ChatGPT will be great for speeding up and maybe making automation more efficient. I think and I think there's certain parts of content that AI is going to be really helpful for. Descriptions of products. I think you could probably do a general professional bio using AI.
How about podcast transcripts? I mean, we all use things like Otter.ai or even Office 365 now has built-in transcription built into it. So,
and one thing I was going to bring up is that we've all been using either Grammarly or ProWriter's Aid or
so true
Hemingway app for years. It's the same principle, right? It cleans up your writing. It makes it more. So what I have used AI for mostly thus far is to make my writing smoother and better, because sometimes I write a little choppy because I'm writing like what's in my head, getting the facts out, and it needs to be smooth. It needs to be smoothed down a little bit. So you put in, I want this to be casual and friendly, and it smooths it out. But I wouldn't want you to. I say that AI is great for what I call micro copy or micro content. So no more than a paragraph at a time. I think you can use it to generate ideas for headlines and thereby unique value propositions if you're working on that. But here's the thing: when you do any of that, you've got to have your information. You got to know what your input is, if you will, and so you can't it won't magically pull that out of your head. You've got to input that. So
no question. Now, the other road I wanted to go down with AI is if AI is kind of what ChatGPT does and many other AI sources do, is to scour the internet for the information. That's where they're getting it from. So the two issues we have is one, timeliness. But to me, the biggest issue we often have is copyright. So if ChatGPT is scouring the internet for information, how do we know the information that ChatGPT pulls in is not copyrighted or not, or Creative Commons? We don't know that. And that's an issue.
Why, that's the thing I worry about them not citing their sources like a good college term paper writer would do. They always told me to cite your sources. You put your little information on your index card, and you put where it came from. You got to cite your sources, or you got to, and of course on the internet, basically citing your source. You don't have to do footnotes, although I have seen people do that. I think a link usually, is suffice. Like, this is where this comes from. You can go read more about it, especially with data studies and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you run the risk. And what's really ironic is you can use AI to find out if something is plagiarized, but apparently you can use AI to plagiarize. So it's kind of
well, they've already got, I was reading somewhere recently, they had one major U.S. university that had 100 students expelled for using ChatGPT to write their term papers. So it's already happening, folks.
Yeah. So the thing about AI and ChatGPT, and this is not really a good or bad thing. It's just the nature of it. You're speeding up something, right? Speeding up process. Those who already have a propensity for trying to find shortcuts are going to use it.
We'll try and use them to find shortcuts.
Yeah, and use it for wrong. That's why I said a while ago, I think ChatGPT is going to be great for making automation more efficient. When I talk about automation, is like you think about Zapier or using automation for, like, I heard somebody say, I was looking for, I don't remember what it was they were looking for, some kind of information they needed to do some task. And they said they asked ChatGPT, and they did it, and it did it, to write a script to go out on the internet and find this information and deliver it. Like, that's an efficient use of doing something that, they're trying to do a task. There's a word, there's a people say, how to know if you automate something. Well, if it's repeatable and, there are things that we have to automate to make life easier as a business owner. And we do it all the time. That's why most people don't use Excel to keep up with their client list, and, but there are things I think, that ChatGPT is going to help with. I'm thinking right now, let's say I could ask ChatGPT, I need to have a list of journalists in the tech security space to contact about my new business, my new plugin for WordPress security. Some people who write about WordPress security, and if you could have ChatGPT go out and find that information for you. Sometimes the information ain't going to be correct, but you just sped up something that would take you hours to do, right? You would probably hire somebody on Fiverr to do it. Well, now you just tell ChatGPT. So I heard somebody did something like that with ChatGPT. I can't remember what the information was.
So I got to tell you,
ChatGPT to write a script to go out and find that information.
I got to tell you, I was talking to one of these copywriting firms recently, the ones that write copy for websites and stuff, just for comparison's sake. And one of the things they said is they vet their writers by having them do samples. And would you believe some of these people writing for these firms are trying to write samples using ChatGPT to circumvent the system so they don't have to do any work?
So you don't want to hire those people, do you?
No. So they said their increase. So to give you an example, in December, they caught 24 instances. This month, they caught over 1,000, believe it or not, of people writing stuff with ChatGPT.
I would be curious to know if they pay to do that.
No, this was the submissions to get on the.
I know, but the test from the company, because a lot of times companies will have you do that test unpaid, and I'm not going to say they should use AI or Chat GPT to do that, but I can see why somebody would if they're having to do something that takes them a while and they're not getting paid for it.
Well, there'll always be the people to try and circumvent. Remember the days of plagiarism where we'd sit down and you wouldn't do your homework questions? You'd look at your friend and say, can I borrow your homework so I can scroll the answers down quickly? So when the teacher does a homework check, I'll pass.
And that's why teachers always change up the test each semester. a little bit. So because,
right.
Kids wouldn't, I know there's always going to be people who do, and it's a fine line, right? In one instance, it can be ingenious and ingenuity
Yep.
but the other side is just, unethical. So there's a fine line, right? But you don't want to cross that line and go to the unethical side. So, schools, they expel people for plagiarism. That ought to tell you, in the business blogging world, and I think some of it has settled down a little bit. It was Wild West probably a few years ago. People doing all kinds of stuff and copying, ripping off people's ideas without attribution. Well-known people doing that, and it seems to have settled down a little bit. But I would like to see a little bit more standards for, a lot of companies who are worth their salt and get people to write articles for them tend to go out and find people. They try to anyway. It just depends on what the company's doing. I've listened to a lot of companies, and some are just looking for content. And it almost seems like for content's sake. Well, when you do that, you're not going to care about standards, And I think Google's beyond that. So create a style guide which has standards in it. And again, go back and listen to the podcast with Maddie Osmond. Get her book. She walks you through doing a style guide. I can't say enough about what Maddie has done with that book. And I think it will affect the digital marketing industry if people keep. I tell people, it's like people will come to me about doing content, and I'm like, first of all, go buy a copy of Maddie's book if you haven't already, and create a style guide if you plan on having people. But I listened to other people like Joel Klecke the other day was talking to him. He had this on LinkedIn. He had this like bulleted list about how they vet writers. And Joel, also from Canada, runs Case Study Buddy. And it was pretty interesting to hear that. I'm like, okay, this doesn't really affect, isn't completely relevant to me right now, but it might be in 5 years. And I get students to write for me for Conway Scene, and I loosely vet them because I understand that they haven't really done professional writing other than what they've done in school. I vet them a little bit. I ask them to send me copies of stuff they've written. And sometimes they'll say, well, I've never written anything like that. I said, I don't care. Just send me a copy of what you've written. I'm looking to see that they can write, and then the rest of it, we can work with them on. So, but when you're paying somebody to write content for you, insist that they have some quality standards. If you have to, hire Maddie's team to build you a style guide, that's a great place to start, in my opinion.
I think every business, including a small business, should have a style guide. I've even developed one for my own that goes everything from the fonts I use to the colors I use to the tenses I use with certain words. So consistency is what a style guide gives you. And,
that's what I'm working towards more now, because obviously Copyfly for the most part has been me, right? You know what you like in your head, but for Conway Scene, you're starting to see more people write. I'm like, okay, I need to have, like, instead of just editing their stuff, I need to have, like, a style guide that says these things. I have to get them out of my head, and because we're going to have more writers going forward. But I've been fortunate to have some really good writers from the university locally, so. And that's a good place to start, too. Some of these kids are looking for opportunity to write, to put on their portfolio. If you live, like I live in a town with 3 colleges. And if you live in a town or near a town with colleges, contact the writing department and see if any of the kids would be willing to write.
Or the other place is conferences. Not related to this, but I had somebody come up to me at PodCamp and said, "Are you willing to take somebody on to do something, to learn to do editing with me?" And I might actually do that. So there's always people trying to learn a little bit. So I give them credit. Like, you got to start somewhere. But the key is, like with writing, is AI is a good base, and I think that's what it provides. But I wouldn't be using AI as the end-all end personally. But
not long form content. Like I said, micro content, micro copy. I can see, like, you have an e-commerce site. Somebody's listening, have an e-commerce site. Maybe you're starting with 50 products. You got to write a description for every one of those. Might give AI a try. It might really speed up that process a little bit for you. Got to write a professional bio because you're speaking somewhere. Pull up AI. Let AI help you do that. Those are excellent places. Then when you start to write stuff, drop your paragraph in there. I think this paragraph needs some smoothing over. Drop the paragraph in there, like the one I use, the AI Copysmith. I think it's called Copysmith. Copysmith.ai. I can drop the paragraph in there and click rewrite, and it'll rewrite it. And you can look at several variations, and it's almost always better than what I wrote. So, it's really helpful in that regard. So there's a lot of ways, and I think Ryan has used a phrase as AI to help him come up with outlines for articles. So there's another place, that you can use AI to help.
I have used AI to generate subject lines, and that's really handy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can use it and you can literally generate probably dozens of headline options in just a few seconds. And, it's also a brainstorm tool. There's so many things. I'm never going to say don't use AI. I use AI. Just use it. Just realize that writing a complete article or your entire homepage is probably not going to work well. However, there are sections on those things that you can use AI to make better. Like on the homepage, I'm pretty big on the hero area being a headline based on your unique value proposition.
I agree.
You may have to, run that through a few times and you'll get a better option. And you can test those. So, sections like that can be, I think some of the AIs have a storytelling feature. I haven't yet to try that, but, that might be an option if you're writing your own story. So, there's a lot of ways to use AI. The temptation is to shortcut things, right? Oh, I'm going to write this 1,200 article I need to write using AI. And that's probably not a good idea because it's probably going to pull up information that needs to be cited, unless you go back and thoroughly edit it. And also, I think you're going to miss out on some of the things you need to have in an article, like making it memorable and engaging and original thoughts. Those kinds of things are going to be hard to replicate in an AI setting.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you 100%, Todd. Is there anything else you want to add into the AI discussion?
Most of the AI places, AI software online will have some kind of free trial. You can always try. I'd probably tried 3 or 4 of them before I settled, and it was based on a price point and what I got for the price. So if you're in the WordPress space, Bertha is an option as well. And but I can tell you, if you use it very much, you'll run out of that free pretty quick. But I think it's worth playing around with. And like I said, I think you'll find a lot of people don't do a very good job with their headlines and with articles in the WordPress space. And I think the AI tools can help make, and I'm against clickbaity headlines, but you can still write a engaging headline without being clickbaity. But AI can help with some of that stuff. So I would just say try out several of them, and they all have. I think I have tried most of them at one point, the free trial. So anybody interested, if you want to ask me questions about it, feel free to ping me. I'll tell you what I know.
Todd, thanks for joining me. Where's the best place to ping you, either on Twitter or by email?
Twitter or Facebook, or you can email me. But I'm following Twitter and Facebook pretty closely. My Twitter is @TEJones, and Facebook, I'm Todd E. Jones on that. And you can, I think, Todd@copyflat.com. It would be my best email.
Todd, thanks for joining me today and sharing your insights into the world of AI and copywriting. Much appreciated.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much. This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. A very special thank you to Todd Jones for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.